Hello, and welcome to another episode of For the Love of Sports. My name is Michael Rasile, and this is where I get to talk about sports. I get to talk about business, and I get to talk about everything in between. I have my good friend Chris Aumueller here today. He's the CEO and founder of FanWord. He also played tennis at Nebraska. He was a two-time bronze medalist as a coach for the German national team at World Championships, and was even a German national champion for tennis himself. Chris, how you doing today, man?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, Michael. Glad to be here.
Please, man, the pleasure is all mine. And so, Chris, I am very excited for the conversation to see how you've grown your company, what you've done, and how you've done it. But the first question I have for everybody on the For the Love of Sports podcast is, why do you love sports so much?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just grew up around it, to be honest with you. So, started getting into tennis when I was like 5 years old. So I guess I never really known a life without sports. And you know, thinking back, whether it's from my time as an athlete or as a coach or fan as of today, but some of my best memories stem from sports, and some of my best friends are friends from sports, and whether those are former teammates or rivals even or whatever else. But yeah, I just think it's for me it's my life. It's that it's defined my life in so many ways, and without sports I would have never came over here to the US either, and probably never started my own business. So a lot of the best things in my life can be contributed back to sports. So yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's good. That story and kind of again how you've been able to take advantage of the situation and what you've done and what you've been not given, but what you've taken, what you've earned, and be able to put it forward. And as you said, I mean, you came over here to play sports. Came to Nebraska. I'll be honest, if anyone went to Nebraska, I had to assume it was for football, but it was obviously not for
Fair enough.
football, as we said, it was for tennis. Where does tennis, is that just something that was in your family? Was it something that you picked up young? I mean, it's kind of like swinging a baseball bat, just a little more running than baseball. I guess where did the
Yeah,
love of tennis come from?
a little bit more control too sometimes,
A
I
little
would
bit.
assume. But no, I mean, I had an older brother who was playing more so as a hobby than anything else, and my dad was also playing, just for the fun of it, nothing ever, competitively or professionally by any means. But when I was 6 years old, they took me with them. Probably one of those days where they didn't know what else to do with the young kids, so took me with them, and started playing or hitting a tennis ball a little bit. And then a coach approached us and probably just wanted to make some money, and said, "Hey, your son looks like he has some talent and good eye-hand coordination and stuff. So you should take some tennis lessons." And before I knew it, I was in having some lessons with him, and yeah, it just took off from there. To be honest, yeah.
Here we are. Yeah, your 6-year-old son, I can see him being a prodigy. Maybe you should let me coach him a little bit. I like that. But hey, it worked out.
Yeah,
It worked out.
yeah,
It got
worked
you
out.
here.
Yeah,
I mean, it got you here today, man. I mean, if there's anywhere on planet Earth you'd rather be, I'm sure it's not with me. So, you made it to the top, man. You absolutely made it to the top.
appreciate it.
That part's important. But
Not
no,
entirely, but yeah.
oh man, but no, I'm excited to get to talk to you a little bit about that, and we're going to weave
Sure.
the tennis aspect of the conversation in because I think it's a really interesting way of looking at it. Because again, here in America, when we think of sports, first is baseball or football, basketball, and then hockey. Comes in fourth. I mean, obviously, soccer is now on the rise.
Mhm.
There's a lot of other stuff going on. I mean, we love golf here. We do love tennis as well, with the U.S. Open just happening. I go to the U.S. tennis. I have been at least the last couple of years. Absolutely love it there. Unfortunately, couldn't go this year, but it's just, I mean, there's so many different sports, but when we think of sports for whatever reason, we think of the major four, right? And it's
Mhm.
it's football, it's NFL, and then it's also college football on top of that. You coming from a place like Nebraska, I'm sure
Yeah.
it's college football and then NFL. But talk to me about FanWord a little bit. I think it's a really interesting company that you've been able to, as you said, you started, you're the founder, you're the CEO, you're the creator of it.
Mhm.
And it's kind of had a couple different iterations along the way. So I guess just tell
Yep.
me, what is FanWord right now?
Yeah, so I mean, if I had to define it, what it is today, we like to describe it as a full service storytelling agency, and we're all about humanizing brands and helping them essentially, reach their objectives by leveraging their very own stories and bringing their stories to life. So we're very heavily driven on, the storytelling piece and again the humanization piece. And um, in the sports world, we often like to use the example of the Players Tribune and just kind of picture this type of content as a service for individual athletic department, for teams, for leagues, for conferences, trying to bring their favorite or their athletes, their coaches, their alumni, their staff members, their fans kind of closer together and build that personal, human connection between each other a little bit more. And then, obviously, big goal is always to boost the strategic objective, whether it's for fan engagement purposes, for sales or fundraising purposes, for recruiting purposes. That kind of changes the narrative a little bit as far as in which format we tell these stories, who the storytellers are, what the stories are about, how and where they're presented, how we go about distributing that, which is, all coming together and is part of what we do. So it's really not just, we're not just content creators and then, hey, here's the content, good luck. We really like to be on it from a strategic angle and really support all the individual stages and steps along the way. And, as I said, help with the strategic piece behind it, and then the distribution piece, the presentation piece, and everything that kind of comes with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that part is very important. The strategy behind it, right? Because anyone can buy an $80 microphone off Amazon, get a StreamYard account for 20 bucks, and look at me now. I'm a content creator, right? But it's I think it's the strategy behind it that I'm really interested in, and understanding how you've been able to develop this side of the business. Because again, you have the ability to talk. You're a very personable guy. You have some charisma. Hey, you're a personality, right? That was easy. Bang, you finished it. But
very nice. I like it.
How did you, I guess, where along the way, and I know, again, it's had a couple different iterations. What did FanWord kind of start out as originally before we started using buzzwords like storytelling and strategic content play? What was it before we realized what it could be and what it has become?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and maybe just, for context, I'll give you the quick backstory, but the idea for the company really came from my time as a student athlete, actually. I for the lack of a better word, I'm not sure if frustrated is the right word, but I'm using it anyways. I was a little bit frustrated that all the attention really went to football and basketball in college. Completely understood why that was the case. I love football, I love basketball. But I just always, I just always felt like, at least, that there were so many athletes and so many sports and schools and teams that did phenomenal things, but didn't necessarily get the recognition that I felt like they deserved. And that was really what sparked the idea back in the day. What can I do to bring that spotlight to some of these folks and again, teams and schools and teams, sports. And at first, when we started, the goal was to solve this with a social networking app that essentially allowed users to say, hey, I'm a fan of Nebraska football, Nebraska track and field, Ohio State wrestling, Michigan State volleyball, San Diego State women's soccer, and really, based on their preferences, then had their own news feed, their own schedules and scores feed, their own rankings feed. Et cetera, et cetera. And that was really what we've built for the first 2 years. And that's how we wanted to solve that, right? Kind of by combining these things. And I ran into pretty much every challenge and probably also made every mistake a first-time entrepreneur does. And it was just an incredibly tough journey. We ended up developing the app. We brought it to market. We launched it. People were really liking it. It worked well. But we had a poor business model. We didn't really have a path to revenue, or at least not with the resources that we had. We kind of knew how we wanted to get there, but doing it is a whole different challenge. And as a way to promote the app, we started telling these stories of athletes. And the goal was to, especially tell these stories of, again, lesser known athletes maybe, but then bring people, to kind of build awareness and then, get them to download the app and use it and et cetera, et cetera. And what we realized was, people loved those stories. They loved the content that we produced. B, it didn't translate to app downloads because what we were offering on the app was very different than, that type of content. And, a couple of other things, but all of this combined essentially led us to kind of look into, hey, what about we actually pursue this in a different way? And now when I look back, if you recall, like the reason I started this to bring the attention, bring the spotlight to some of those lesser known athletes and sports. What we do today is a lot more aligned with that than, the mobile app that we had launched back in the day. So in a very funny and partially depressing way we came to who we are today. But yeah, it's been a journey without a doubt.
And journeys are fun, right? It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. We can throw
Uh,
out every friggin'
that
cliche,
saying,
and
I hear
I
that
hate it, but
everyone tells me that.
yeah, dude,
But I mean, it's true. It's true.
it's true, but it's also bullshit. Like, let's be honest, man. I want to have a good destination. You have to be knowing, but in particularly in this case, I mean, you were working towards a destination that sounded
Sure.
like it was going to help a lot of people, as you said, understanding the niche aspect of sports. There are people out there that want to pay attention solely to that San Diego State women's soccer team.
Mm-hmm.
There's people
Yeah.
out there that want to pay attention to the Michigan State volleyball team. But unfortunately for you guys, that path to revenue, where if you don't make enough money, you can't continue to help these people,
Exactly.
was
Yeah.
not there. So, in terms of, as you said, the way to promote the app, so really the storytelling aspect kind of more started as a marketing ploy
Mm-hmm.
than
Yeah.
anything else. And I
Very
guess
true. Yeah.
at what point do you sit down with your other founders, or do you sit down with, the other people that are at the business with you, or if it's just you
Mm-hmm.
at this point, or, some
Mm-hmm.
freelancers? How do you sit down and have that really difficult conversation of, we got together to do this thing, it's
Yeah.
working, but we can't figure out a way to get money? How
Yeah.
do you then make that decision to go over and say, okay, now this is probably a better pathway to money.
Mm-hmm.
Let's abandon the thing we started to do to switch over to do something like this?
Yeah. No, it's a great question, and I think it's actually one of the hardest things for any founder is to be honest with themselves.
Hmm.
I literally had a conversation yesterday with a friend of mine here in Lincoln, who had a consulting business, I guess, and he was very honest about it. He said, I don't know, 500 warm leads, and it resulted in like one sale. And he was like, it's just not happening, right? But I think coming to those realizations is very, very difficult, especially when you're passionate about it, what you're doing, what you're starting, because it is essentially a failure. It is essentially, you have to admit that what you wanted to do, what you were passionate and set out to do, does not work out the way it does, and it's completely normal. I mean, the vast majority of businesses, the way they start, I mean, they have to iterate until they really understand the market and figure out what people want and need, what they're willing to pay money for. But you come up with a lot of excuses in those early days, and you're like, well, we didn't market this correctly, it wasn't the right time, or we didn't have a good conversion funnel from when we told these stories to getting users to download the app. I mean, we had a ton of excuses too. I made a ton of excuses, and fortunately, in this case, at least fortunately, I was a solo founder, and I had investors and stuff though that I have to talk to about this, and it's difficult. It's absolutely difficult because especially on the investor side, those people give you money to fulfill your dream and fulfill your passion. And I mean, granted, a lot of these people are aware how this works, and they're more betting on me rather than maybe the idea per se in those early stages. And it's not like, fortunately, I was responsible for putting food on their table and stuff either. But nonetheless, I mean, I grew up in a way where my parents, they educated me in a way that whoever supports you on your journey, you got to be grateful for that and pay them back in whatever context. So not only coming to that realization, but then going down that path of pivoting is tough. It's very tough. And at this point, though, it was just simply, I mean, for me, it was a ton of, sitting down and looking into this and really figuring out how can we get to revenue, to profitability with the app. And there were a couple of options, and just none of them seemed like a good idea at that time. I mean, sure, I could have raised more capital, built a team, or tried to raise more capital, build a team, and figure this out. But I don't know. And rightfully, as I said, when we started telling these stories, my heart was in that too. And it was during a time when a company like the Players Tribune really became more popular, and it was just so interesting and fascinating to me as a fan purely to learn about some of these great athletes from a completely different angle. So yeah, I mean, it was just a bunch of different factors kind of coming together. But at the end of the day, I'm just so passionate about what I do and the industry and being an entrepreneur that for me it was at the end of the day still a relatively easy call, because I knew if I didn't commit to pivoting, there wouldn't be a business in 6 months or so. So I I mean, we still have the app. We aren't doing anything with it anymore. So if any of the listeners want to, whatever, I'm just making this up. But
No. Someone wants to buy it. Just give me,
exactly, give me a
5% finder's
call.
fee. We're good to go. How's that sound?
No, I mean that you never know what's happening, and that's one of the beauties I think too of this within this entrepreneurial journey. It's just opportunities are everywhere, and you never know what's gonna come out of this. But yeah, I mean, all of this led me to what we do today. So in a very very dark sense, this was all good.
Yeah. Hey, man,
But yeah.
you're here now. As I said, you're on this show. Sincerely, how much higher can you get? But with that, like, again, going to that marketing ploy, essentially that marketing avenue, and seeing it
Mhm.
had to have worked in some capacity. What was it? And again, understanding your role, and I'm grateful that we got to talk about
Mhm.
that a little bit. And we'll continue to weave this into the conversation with, you as an athlete, no one really knowing who you are. They'll look at your box score, they'll look at your statistics. They say, Chris
Yeah.
did a great job today, or Chris sucks today. In reality, they didn't watch the game. They don't know exactly what happened or how it happened. With that, and understanding you're passionate about that as well, why did you think this was the correct pivot? Why was there no other pivots that you could do, or why did you believe that this was the right avenue to go down? And was this one of a few things that was on the table, or was this
Mhm.
the one thing that you're like, nope, figured it out? It sucks that we have
Yeah.
to move, but we're going to do this now.
Well, I think one of the best ways to figure out if what you want to do works or doesn't work is to actually do it. So it's not like I was conducting 6 months of research
Mhm.
and did 1,000 customer interviews and figured out if this is the right thing to do. So it was still very passion driven. It was a low cost pivot in the sense of us pivoting towards this as a service model almost, and really focusing on that storytelling piece, and creating stories, which is really how this whole thing started. For the first couple months, we just created some stories for the heck of it, and didn't know if we wanted to be a media company or if we wanted to offer this as a service, which is what we eventually decided to do. But I didn't know if it was the right pivot or not. I just, went with my guts, went with, the stories that we did produce when we were still using it to promote the app generate some great numbers as far as, engagement, as far as clicks and views and so forth. So we knew that this type of content drives quite a bit of eyeballs and quite a bit of interest. So we didn't have all the pieces together in the sense of, well, how can we turn this into revenue per se? But we knew that this is probably something that we can turn into something that generates revenue. And it was, but when I started the app, I was not a developer, right? So I outsourced our core function, which is something I told myself I would never do again, because is workhorse a fair term in the English language? I'm not sure, but I love to work, and I work, not sure if I'm allowed to cuss, but I SHIT ton
You can
of
say shit.
hours.
It's fine. No F bombs. I
Fantastic.
try and take the F bombs out. Everything
All
else is
right.
pretty much fine. Yeah.
Okay, then some shit ton of hours every single week. But um, where was I going with this? But
Workhorse.
workhorse, I know. But where was I going with
You
this? Now
outsource
you
the application and you
outsource.
never
There
want to
you
do that
go.
again because
There you go. Because I was just sitting on my hands, right? I couldn't with the app. I just there were things that I wanted to change and wanted to fix, but I just couldn't. And it didn't matter if I wanted to work 10 hours, 12 hours a day. I just couldn't do it. So I was figuring out what I can do with my time, and invested into tasks and responsibilities that would advance the app. But for the most part, the technology piece, I just couldn't really help with that. So shifting towards that more content creation piece, which is really what the main focus was when we pivoted for at first. That was my thing, and I could do that, and I've done this for a very long time. I was also I'm a self-taught graphic designer. So I started a graphic design discussion board back home in Germany with a couple of friends, and we grew it to like the third largest in the country. So I had a really big passion for graphic design. So with these stories that we produced, we could present them in a really cool and visually appealing way, which was also down my alley from a UX and UI perspective. We could create these cool social graphics to promote them on social media. So those were just all pieces that were more aligned with my strength and my toolkit really. Yeah. So to answer your question, I didn't have an answer whether or not this was the right thing to do, but I knew that I just got to give it a try because I knew that the other thing wouldn't work. Did we talk about other options and other avenues? We did, but nothing was as feasible or as intriguing as this path. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this path is very interesting. And then there's a couple paths of questions that I want to kind of travel down a little bit
Sure.
here as well. So with let's start with you before we move on to the business again. With
Hmm.
your background, with what you've done, with what you've seen, how did you, when you were an athlete, try and tell your
Hmm.
story? Or was this where did you not have that avenue? Did you not have that
Hmm.
opportunity to tell your story? And that's where this,
Hmm.
love of telling other
Hmm.
athletes' stories come in.
Yeah, I have to admit I was pretty bad at it. I was not big on social. I was not big on personal brand building in general, but mostly because I just didn't know about it. It is something that isn't talked about enough. I mean, now with especially in college sports with NIL rights changing next year, that becomes more and more of a popular discussion, which I'm super stoked about, and that where we're going to play a big role in as well from a business perspective. But back when I was an athlete, which was 2008 to 2012, it just wasn't a thing, or at least for me, it wasn't a thing, and no one has given me the feeling that I should do this. I was a good tennis player, but I never really had enough faith in my own ability to turn this into a pro career. So I knew that okay, after college you might continue to play a little bit on a semi-pro level, but I never saw the value of doing it myself. So I did a very poor job myself of telling my story, and that is actually something that today inspires me because I now see the value of people building their personal brands, and whether it's starting next year on the collegiate side for monetary reasons, or just for off the field stuff, or just following your passion in general and connecting with an audience on a more personal and authentic level. It doesn't matter why, but I just did a poor job with it. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that part, I think that's one of the more interesting parts because it's something that you love doing now, but at the
Hmm.
time, I mean, when you were 18, 19, 20, surprise, you really good at it yet, right? Like
Yeah.
it's one thing that we always kind of talk about these college kids and these college athletes as if they were 25 years old with fully developed
Hmm.
brains. But in reality, that's not the case at all. They're friggin' 18 years old. They've been coddled most likely their whole lives, depending on the sport, of course.
Sure.
And it's just one of those frustrating things where in the media, we or they, however we want to say it,
Hmm.
kind of make it as if these kids should have all the answers. When in reality, I mean, I still don't have all the answers. I'm almost 29. You don't have all the answers. You're what, 29 and a half?
32.
Okay, 32.
Yeah.
You said it, not
Sorry.
me. No, you're good.
With the beard,
But
I look a little
it,
older.
yeah, mine too, actually. Mine's coming in nice.
Yeah.
But it's just a very interesting concept. And I guess with that, we'll continue to travel down that path a little bit more with
Hmm.
NIL, with some of these things that are happening. I know you work with schools like Alabama, you work with schools like Nebraska now, and telling these stories.
Hmm.
How are you able to go and how are you able to go and tell these stories in an authentic way when it's for a service rather than just as a media company? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. I mean, we excuse me. We kind of when we do approach schools, we almost pitch it in a way, hey, we want to be your own media company or part of your own media company because there's value in producing, essentially acting like your own media company.
Hmm.
And a lot of these big Power Five schools, they do a fantastic job of um, producing really really cool and really powerful content. But nonetheless, this in-depth storytelling content, which is what we are mostly known for, which is going to be a part of our how we want to tackle the NIL space, but it's not all of it, right? It's one big piece of it, but that in-depth kind of storytelling content, it just takes time. It is a time-consuming piece. It is not saying that these schools don't know how to do this themselves, but this is all we do, or
Hmm.
we like to think of ourselves as experts in that space. So we know how to extract a great story out of an athlete, out of a coach, and they also feel very comfortable talking to us sometimes compared to talking to maybe a staff member or so, because it's just a different dynamic, I guess. So we just I mean, these conversations, again, like going back to what I said earlier, I mean, these conversations always start with, hey, what is it that you're trying to accomplish, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then we can figure out if what we're doing, what our expertise is in, is actually, are we able to help with that or not? If a school wants to push their recruiting efforts and come across as a more as a and kind of connect with recruits on a more emotional and personal level, and kind of show some behind the scenes stuff, yeah, we can definitely help with that, right? If a school wants to do a fundraising campaign and connect with donors again on a more personal level, and really show these donors where their money is going, the impact that money has had, yeah, we can absolutely help with that. So but at the end of the day, it has to align with what they're trying to accomplish. And these schools that we partner with, I mean, yeah, you name it. We work with some of the biggest, and we work with pretty small schools as well on D1 level. We even have D2 and D3 schools as partners. It's really just a matter of how can we help, and if our expertise really aligns with what they're trying to accomplish, and we want to be known as a solution-driven partner, and not just, right, those are content creators, great, right? We want to be known as a solution-driven agency that just helps, on a variety of different fronts. But this is kind of just our expertise, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that part's the most important, right? Is it's not just content for content's sake. It's fun, right? Like
Yeah.
I do this because I like it. I don't make any money on
Yeah.
this yet. One day we'll get there. But I do this because it's fun and I enjoy having conversations like this. But as you said, you're really taking it way to the next level. You're probably 2, 3, 4, 5 steps above and ahead of most people, because you're able to look at it from that. Okay, let's look at it from a strategic standpoint. How can we
Mhm.
make sure that whatever you're trying to accomplish, we can do that through the aspect of content? Now, most people just
Mhm.
think it's like, oh, you put out good content, people will watch it, and you can sell advertising against it, which is true. But if there's better things that you want to do with that, and you want to accomplish a specific goal, that is also a
Mhm.
possibility. And that's where you guys come in, which I think is pretty cool. And sticking on the NIL discussion just for a couple more minutes,
Mhm.
how do you see have I'm assuming once that discussion started coming up, the NCAA, they'd never let it happen. They never let it happen.
Mhm.
All right, they'll look into it. All right, it looks like it's going to happen next year, right? Like, it's funny
Mhm.
how the NCAA is useless, and none of us really like them. We just kind of have to deal with them at this point. Um, how do you talk to these schools about this opportunity? Because again, right, it's the schools that are hiring you. I don't think it's
Mhm.
any of these 18, 19, 20-year-old kids that aren't allowed to work are
Mhm.
hiring you. It's the schools. So how do you talk to the schools about this opportunity to get them to understand it's more money, it's better recruiting, it's more opportunity for the kids, they can be
Mhm.
happier, which again will then lead to better play, potentially better grades, and then more recruiting.
Yeah.
It's a cycle, right? Doing
Yeah.
this one thing will start this loop over and over and over
Mhm.
again. How do you discuss these opportunities with the schools, especially like the
Mhm.
Alabamas of the world?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think now schools are very much aware of,
Yeah.
um, hey, we need to be a part of this, and we need to be able to prepare for it, even if they, I mean, it's still pretty blurry in a lot of areas, right?
Right.
But they know, especially you see some of the big programs. You saw Nebraska being kind of like a pioneer in this. Clemson, you had an Oklahoma State. Like, you see some of these Power Five schools already making these types of decisions and partnering with companies to help with their brand building from a variety of angles. But it's almost like a FOMO already, right? Like the fear of missing out. Like, hey, if two of our other conference
Hmm.
schools decide to do something, we can't be falling behind, because the vast majority of it comes down to recruiting, right? If you recruit top talent in the country, and that kid looks at 5 different schools, and 3 of those have a program in place that will help him monetize his brand. It's just a different
Hmm.
variable that will, whether we like it or not, play a humongous factor in student athletes' decision moving forward. So it's really not a hard play as far as
Hmm.
convincing them of the value. It's more a matter of a discussion in terms of, okay, because this is new for everyone, right? What is it that how can we best help, right? Like, we have our solution in place from like the cool thing for us is that a lot of these services, I guess, that will come into play there are things that we're doing for years, whether it's on the content creation side, whether it's on the graphic design and personalized content side, whether it's on the website creation and branding and logo design kind of piece, which we do for a lot of other brands and stuff, right? So bringing this all together isn't necessarily the hard piece. It's more like figuring out what is it that really adds most value to you, and being that trusted partner that they can rely on, that will really, be there for their student athletes 24/7, as weird as it sounds, and answer those questions and make sure brand safety is happening and compliance is happy and can sleep at night calmly. These types of things. So and a lot of schools don't want to be a first mover. They want to be a second mover and see kind of how others are doing it, which is perfectly fair too. So right now it's just a ton of having these discussions and figuring out what it is that adds most value, and then seeing how we can tackle this. But I don't know. I'm just personally incredibly stoked for athletes to have that opportunity. And again, this is maybe where a little bit of my soft spot for Olympic sports kicks in too. I mean, obviously I love the opportunity for those football players and basketball players and other stars that have, let's say, a large social following, and figure out how they can monetize that, for instance. But also I'm thinking of the tennis players, the track athletes, the softball players, the soccer players, the wrestlers, and so forth, that maybe don't have the social following per se, but still wanna maybe have a passion for launching their own podcast, or want to give lessons or their own camps, or just wanna figure out a way how they can build their personal brand for employment purposes later on, right? So to be seen and to be heard somehow, just really helping these athletes to figure out how they can do a better job of telling their story, how to develop a brand statement, and really understand that, hey, I'm a brand too. It's going to be super exciting. So yeah.
Yeah, athletes need to understand that they are a brand now, whether they like it or not. That's just kind of how
Totally.
it goes. Whatever you put on social media, it has to be on brand, really. And if it's
Mhm.
not, then people are going to get confused and not understand. And so it almost sounds like you guys, as a content for service type business, it also sounds like there's a lot of like consulting involved too. With
Mhm.
it sounds like people are reaching out to you. Hey, should I not post this? Should I not talk about this? Do you get those questions a lot, especially as you said from even the athletes?
Yeah, I mean, to your earlier point, you said you might not think that the individual athletes might be a market, but I actually
Mhm,
think they will be. Whether it's on the collegiate level
mhm.
or even earlier on the high school level, to help them. Maybe the goal is a different one in this case, to be recruited, right, or to be seen by other
True, yeah.
schools. But to answer your question, especially when it comes to the upcoming NIL changes, education will play a humongous part. Whether it's teaching athletes how to develop their brand or how to manage their brand, or what to pay attention to when they do get approached by a company, or I mean, there are so many things to this that it has to be has to start from an educational point of view, or a consulting piece, or whatever you want to call it. So do athletes? I mean, we stay in a lot of we stay in touch with a lot of the athletes that we do stories for, and help them kind of
Mhm.
figure those things out. And we've been approached by quite a few athletes about, hey, can you help me build my website, or can you help me build my logo and stuff, or hey, can you? I'm not really good on social. Can you help me figure out how to, what kind of content to produce, or kind of help develop a content strategy almost, and these kinds of pieces, and just bringing those all together. I think it's going to be, again, I know I'm repeating myself here, but just stoked for it. Yeah,
Stoked. I love that. I haven't heard that word. I
stoked.
think I watched Johnny
Oh,
Tsunami a couple weeks ago. It was awesome. I think they said it in
my
there. But
my
um
vocabulary is limited, so I
I
gotta I
love
gotta
it.
use all the
Hey,
tools I have.
keep doing what you're doing, man. You're the storyteller here. You're good to go. And so with that, I mean, I think that opens up a lot. And you're totally right. Before I was thinking about it of your current clientele, but you're completely
Mhm,
correct in saying, now with NIL, because now those kids, yeah, they wanted to go to Texas before, but there's probably a better chance to make a couple bucks at Texas than at Texas
mhm,
State. No, qualms with Texas State. But and then also the opposite is true too. If you're the big man on campus at Texas State, maybe it is that
mhm.
frozen yogurt shop that
Yeah,
wants to pay you money to come eat
exactly.
their frozen yogurt. So I think it goes both ways. I think NIL is going to be it's going to be way less bad for English purposes. I'll use those words. Way less bad than what a lot of people think is going to happen. I think the
Mhm,
fact that it's just silly when you think that a college athlete can't monetize their
mhm,
social media, but a college student can.
mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
just because he's on the team, just because he's a tennis player or a
Mm.
football player or a basketball player, he's not allowed. But it's like, well, that's my social media. I've been building it since I was 7.
Yeah.
Why the hell can you tell me that I can't use my social media
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
promote myself? It's just very
Yeah.
confusing, and I don't understand the argument against it, honestly, at this point, and I'm
Or
glad we've made it to the point where these kids are allowed to get paid for their name, image, and
for
likeness.
sure.
That's it.
Yeah, for
That's it.
sure. I mean, also like one area that I'm thinking about a lot and that we really want to help with too is just entrepreneurship, right?
Mhm.
As an entrepreneur myself, I mean, I know so many student athletes that want to start their own business, but I know there was a story a couple of years ago, and actually I shouldn't even bring this up because I can't recall who it was or
Oh,
what it was about, but it was a
I thought it
student
was gonna
athlete that
be
had
like
this.
thought it was gonna be like salacious or something, but alright, you're good.
No, I wish, but I'm sorry. But it was about a kid in college who I think he developed his own water bottle, and don't quote me on this, but and he, I don't know, I think he posted with it somehow on social, and he wasn't allowed to promote his own product, right? That he developed, and you're taking these dreams almost, or you're telling these student athletes to kind of postpone their dreams almost to a degree because they can't really pursue it, and I think that's just crushing too. And again, thinking of a lot of these athletes that may not have the social presence to do so, to monetize it. But I mean, even for the quarterback, with 50,000 followers, sure, he can monetize social,
Mhm.
but at the same time, maybe he has aspirations too to start something, right? And just I don't know, there's just so many so much opportunity and so much awesomeness
Mhm.
about this. So yeah,
Awesomeness, there we go. There's some more
another
words
another word.
breaking through. I
I'm
love it.
learning words.
And I think you're totally correct. There's so many different avenues that these athletes they're put up on a stage. Why? Just because they go to college, they can't
Mhm.
utilize that stage like anybody else. So I think it's very
Totally.
important. And shout out to you guys for acknowledging that, noticing it, and again, you're coming from that background and seeing like, hey, this is. It's different than someone like myself just saying this is a great idea. It's when you went through it for multiple years, you
Mhm.
literally lived it, and now you can say this is what I think is wrong and these are the things that I think I can fix. I think that part is really important and could definitely help a lot of these athletes along the way. And so I appreciate that,
Appreciate it.
Chris.
No,
Thank you
thanks,
for
Joe.
doing what you do. So more, I guess, just to continue down this path a little bit more, I
Mhm.
guess maybe not this path, but we're going to take like a left and then probably a right, I think. With deciding, so before we spoke about how you were kind of on the fence. Do we make this a media company? Do we make this a content for service company or whatever we want to
Mhm.
call it, however you use it? What were the determining factors in that, understanding that, as you were saying before, the strategy and everything else, you kind of had to learn that along the way. That's not why you got into originally starting this business. You got into it to help fans of specific teams and players find a little bit more about these teams and these players. Why didn't you just continue down the media path and say, let's just pump out as many awesome stories as we can and
Mhm.
get advertisers to pay against it
Yeah.
because we're getting so many views and this, that, and the other thing?
Yeah.
Why did you decide against that and went with the
Yeah.
service model?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the main reason was probably because I was a little bit um, scared is the wrong word here, but I that was our business model for the app,
Mhm.
monetize traffic.
Okay.
So I was a little bit, branded almost in the sense that, hey, I don't want to do this again. I don't want to once again bet on, creating enough content that we get to a point where we can, monetize traffic and bring in advertisers and so forth. So I was a little narrow-minded too, as far as, this is the only way to monetize a media company
Mhm.
back in the day. So, but long story short, that the main reason for this was simply the path that I saw to revenue, to profitability, whatever you want to call it. So as a service agency, I could create a database tomorrow and run an email campaign and see if something sticks, right? And I mean, our first client was a Division III school here in
Mhm.
Nebraska, that wanted us to create, I think, 10 stories about athletes for, campus recruiting, essentially to kind of leverage college sports as a driver for recruiting, student recruitment. And we came up with this campaign and so forth. And I mean, that was 2 months or 3 months after we pivoted, and I know that I would have not been able to monetize traffic 3 months after launching a media company. Now today we are actually leveraging a lot of the stories that we create and kind of create our own story platform, whether it's content hosted on our side or whether
Mhm.
it's just linking to those individual A lot of times when we partner with a school, for instance, we create a storytelling platform for them that we populate with content. So on our very own site, we kind of link out to help drive traffic, additional traffic. And I mean, again, if you think of NIL, I mean, when you think of branded content, for instance, I mean, no school is allowed to host branded content on their sites with an athlete. They can't be really affiliated with that. So that opens up another opportunity for us to kind of tap in there. But to answer your question, it was really just mostly a matter of man, I don't want to go down this path right now again, and I just want to figure out a way to make money. So yeah.
And where did you and how did you learn that strategic storytelling aspect? How did you? I'm sure there was a lot of hits and misses, especially in the beginning, because it was, hey, this we can drive traffic to this specific app. We can do this. We can do that. How did you learn that? Because I feel like that's not like super inherent in somebody unless you are very much studying media and understanding how clickbait works and how this aspect of it works. Like, how long did it take for you guys to feel really comfortable to be able to go to schools like Alabama and say, hey, we can do this. We're confident. Let us work for you.
Yeah. I think trial and error again is a great, I mean, if I think through our first story, I mean, actually one of the very, very first stories that we've done for the Division III school, I talked about Nebraska Wesleyan, is to date one of our most powerful stories that we've ever done. And it was about a football player with 1,000 followers maybe, but his story was just, I mean, literally they should make a movie of that story. And I'll give you the quick summary here, but he was a football player that had never scored a touchdown. And he went to Nebraska Wesleyan because of his girlfriend, who ended up breaking up with him, and he became suicidal, and he wanted to take his own life, and he had lost I think a cousin or so prior to that to suicide. So he was in a really, really dark place. And he talks about how the football team actually helped him kind of through it. And then a week before his final football game for the school, his ex called him up and told him that her brother had committed suicide. And then in his last game that he dedicated to that person, he scored the game-winning touchdown in the final drive of the play, which was his first touchdown in school history. I mean, and that story, I mean, that story was organically shared over 300 times within 24 hours, right? I mean, it kind of went viral, right? So the distribution piece, which is a big piece that we help with as well, often for a school like Alabama, for instance, we aren't involved on the distribution side. I mean, they use their channels and stuff, but we had others where, hey, we do a lot of influencer campaigns, for instance, too, with athletes, or we do paid media stuff, right, to kind of really figure out how we can drive distribution here a little bit. But to answer your question, what was your question? Man, sometimes I'm rambling on. What was your question?
How did you learn the strategic aspect?
Oh, yeah. So
you're doing great, though. I love that story. That is an incredible story, by the way.
Yeah, no, it was really cool. But I mean, that was, a little bit of luck too. If you read some of the other stories that we did at first, you're like, oh man, come on, who wants to read that? I mean, we don't just do written content. We also do video content and audio content, whatever. But we started as written content for the most part. So it was really just, figuring out what is it that audiences want, what type of content do they actually, resonate with. How do we get athletes in this case to also open up and talk about, I mean, hey, you're a stranger calling you. Tell me about your suicidal thoughts from 2 years ago. I mean, you have to figure out how to open up to them so they share, their personal stories. We, for instance, one thing that we do a lot is we have a two-sided or a dual review process in place so that no content is ever published without A, storyteller's approval and B, client approval. We do write these stories from a first-person narrative, just to kind of add more authenticity and personality to these stories, kind of similar to the way a Players Tribune does it. So we all of these variables, we kind of, that review piece makes people more comfortable to open up what it is that fans look for and audiences engage with. The writing style, we also when we publish these stories, we care a lot about reading experience. So there's a ton of imagery and quotes and stuff to really make it an easy reading experience for written content, for example. So all these variables just kind of fell into place after doing this for a while and figuring out what people like and what they don't like. And yeah, so I didn't go to school for it. I didn't read 12 books about it. I didn't talk to a guru about it. I just it was just trial and error. Yeah.
It's impressive, man. And I think that part is, again, that's the entrepreneur in you, right? Figuring out you had an idea, you really love the idea of being able to tell these stories. And then once you start telling these stories, I'm sure that increased your thirst for wanting to figure out how to tell them better and
Oh, for
and,
sure.
and
Yeah.
get your clients the best possible results, because then what happens, you get more clients, you can tell more stories, you can do
Yeah.
exactly what you want to do.
Yeah.
And I think,
Exactly.
again,
Yeah.
going back to those cycles, man,
Yeah.
if you can just get it right into that wheelhouse, you'll be good to go, man. So
And
Chris.
that's yeah, yeah. I mean, our writers, the same thing, right? Like, I mean, we are very careful about the writers that work for us because it
Mhm.
is a different type of writing, right? And we've gone through a ton of writers where we're like, hey, you're a great writer, but this is just not
Yeah.
the style that we're looking for. I mean, those stories that we've been, for instance, again, on the writing piece, it's just very conversational. It's just really easy to read, and we ignore some of the journalistic rules and stuff just for the sake of user experience or reader experience. And it just requires a different style. So even finding those writers was a little bit of a journey, but now we have a great team of writers, and again, this is just all iterative process.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I think that part is very important too, and it's not just writing, right? You have video
We
producers
do
and you have
video.
podcasters, you have everybody,
We have
because
a
obviously now keep going.
yeah. Sorry, no, I was just saying we have a relatively big network of creatives that
Mhm.
it's full of writers, videographers, podcasters, photographers, cinematographers that we essentially can fall back, and they're as vetted and as carefully selected as the writers are, right? Where we've done projects with them to see kind of does that align with who we are and what we stand for. And then based on client needs and wants, I mean, yeah, athletic departments is our biggest client, but we work with some professional sports teams. We work with regular companies and brands. We work with governmental organizations. We work with governing bodies. We work with nonprofits. I mean, sports is our expertise and
Mhm.
esports. But yeah, to answer your question, you're absolutely right. We do have we do have talent for all different sorts of content formats. Yeah.
And you're doing something right, man. Chris, this was an awesome conversation. Thank you, dude.
Appreciate it. No,
Yeah,
man, I really enjoyed this.
I
Yeah.
think so. We're about at 50 minutes. I mean, I pretty much hit everything on my list. Was there anything you think we might have missed? Anything you want to touch upon at the end? But because I think we got to the
Oh,
NIL stuff pretty quick, and that would have been
yeah.
the way to end it. But I think we did a killer job. And thank you, man. Again, Christopher Aumueller.
Perfect. You
Yeah,
got
see,
it.
I usually mess it up at the end. Christopher Aumueller, CEO and founder of FanWord, German national champion for tennis. Didn't really get too deep into that, but I'm glad we got to touch upon your story a
That's
little
fair.
bit. Chris, where can everybody find you on the internet?
LinkedIn is probably where I'm most active. They can, always reach out and send a connection request. I'm on Twitter, which I, use not as much as I probably should, but I'm getting
No,
more into it. But
Twitter's the
LinkedIn is my.
worst. Twitter's the
I do
worst
like
social
Twitter, and
handle.
in sports, I like Twitter too.
Yeah.
So I gotta say, but LinkedIn is probably the way to go. And yeah, I mean, to all listeners, whether you work for a school or a team or a company or just want to touch base, I always love to connect with folks in that industry. Always enjoy these conversations. So everyone is more than welcome to reach out and connect. So yeah.
That's awesome, man. I really appreciate having you on. It was an absolute blast to get to know you a little bit more and get to figure out a little bit more about your story. Just saying thank you to everyone in the chat right now. Really appreciate everyone hanging out with us along the way. But sincerely, this was absolutely fantastic. So make sure to go follow Chris. Make sure to do that. If you're listening on the audio podcast, make sure to give us a 5-star review. We always appreciate those as well. But for Chris, for myself, sincerely appreciate it and hope you guys all have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.